Hey everybody, and welcome to my discussion of episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Star Wars Andor. I'm Father Roderick. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I hope you enjoy what I do. If so, don't forget to subscribe and give this stream a thumbs up if you want me to do more. This show will also be available as a podcast for my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/Father Roderick. I think I can even put that here on the screen. How did I do that again? Oh well, does it matter? Banners, I think it's here. Yeah. So there you go. If you go to this link, you'll be able to, if you want to become a patron, you get my show Story Secrets, and that is a weekly show where I do these deep dives, and so the audio version will be a little bit more polished up with more sound effects and music and that sort of fancy stuff. But that's for my patrons. But anyway, welcome, and I hope that we can have a nice time together talking about Andor, which is a fantastic show. I have no other words for it. What I'm going to do is tell my patrons actually that I am online right now, because I'm going to be doing this as much as I can every day at this time. So between my time I'm at Amsterdam time because I'm Dutch. So it's 5 o'clock here. So between 5 and 6 Central European time, I'll always try to do a live stream where we talk about Star Wars or Marvel or anime. All these different stories that we love to share. And what I hope to do is to give you some insight in the deeper themes in those stories, because that's kind of my thing. You can also follow me on TikTok. If you are on TikTok, I've got a pretty big channel there, which focuses on the same things. I do a lot of anime there, especially recently, but I hope to kind of branch out towards Star Wars as well, and to kind of do a mix as I want to do here as well. I do have a separate YouTube channel for anime that is starting to do pretty well. So I'm still on the fence of whether to bring that anime content also here on this channel, or whether I should keep it separate for the purposes of the algorithm, having less difficulty promoting one specific niche. But then again, on the other hand, I want to focus on all sorts of stories. So otherwise, I can't talk about fantasy here on this channel, because then I have to do a special fantasy channel, and that becomes very unwieldy. So what I think I will do is just tell the people that are following me on my anime channel, is just come over here, and we'll talk anime here as well. So as I was saying, I'm going to post this link to the stream to my Discord server. Discord. By the way, if you're new here, I'd love to hear who is watching this. Discord, how do you write that? There you go. So by all means, introduce yourself in the comments. Love to hear where you're from, if you're new, or if you've watched my videos before. And even if you have any suggestions on what else I should do deep dives on, always open for ideas. I'm here for my community. All right, I'm doing this on a very slow PC. It's I think 5-6 years old. It's actually not really made for streaming. It's more of an office computer, but it is faster than my laptop, which is Apple. So I'm just gonna post it here in the Star Wars channel. I'm live on YouTube talking about Andor 426. I'm just going to assume that you are all current on Andor. If not, then you may want to skip the parts where I talk about episodes that you still need to watch. For instance, the last episode, if you haven't seen what happens in episode 6. I will clearly announce when I'm going to talk about each episode, because I'm also dividing this into smaller videos that I will repost here on the channel later on, for people who don't want to kind of work their way through an entire live stream, but just want to have that one specific commentary for episode, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6. Okay, so that seems to work. Alrighty. Maybe I'll also repost that on Facebook. And then, of course, I can also cut off all the banter that I do now before I launch the show. I also do that because it takes a while for people to notice that I'm live. I hope over time, if I keep doing this at the same time, same place all the time, people will automatically know that, hey, let's take a look. But we're not there yet because I haven't done this very often. Okay. Let's post that right here. Star Wars. Whoops. There we go. And then why not, since we're at it, you can also post this on Twitter. Twitter. The only place where I never post these... Oh, wait. I should do TweetDeck. Yeah, there you go. Where I can never post like, hey, I'm live is on Instagram, because for some reason Instagram does not allow you to do links. Well, you can post a link, but it will just render as text and you cannot click on it, which is very strange. Very, very, very strange. I guess they just want to keep you in the app itself. And I can't really stream to Instagram yet. I think I can stream to Facebook, but it's a different audience. Okay. There we are. Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant. Hey, Matt and Rerum and Keith. Not new. Oh, you're a long-time listener. Oh my gosh. Since the since the dawn of podcasting. Very cool. Always love to see these fellow dinosaurs. All right. Let me get my notes here on the iPad. Because I did prepare, actually. Andor. So I've already done 1, 2, 3. I wanted to do all of them on Friday, but there's just so much to talk about. So that was a little bit too optimistic, I think. I'm just going to put it up like this. So it's easier for me to zoom in. Whoops. There we go. All right. Andor 4, Aldani. Had a batch file that would start up the computer and download my RSS feeds. Oh, really? Oh, my gosh. Yeah, the Zen media players. Oh, wow. Those are so old now and so classic that they could show up in Star Wars Andor, because they like to use like these older devices in the background or use them in a different capacity. Hey, Steven. Good to see you. Hope life is good in California. I miss California. I'm going to go back there next year. First to say first, and the second to like. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So it's gonna sound a little bit weird, because every time I start a discussion about a new episode, I'm gonna introduce it as if it is its own little video. But that's because later on I need to cut this up in an audio version and also in a video version. But I'm glad you're here for the live stream as well. All right. Well, I don't have to press any jingles. This is so different from podcasting. I can just continue to talk, and this video will end up somewhere where I can download it. Well, you know what? I'm back, because I'm gonna be here every single day with new content, and with these, especially with these live streams, and that's also because I've been able to get rid of a lot of other stuff that I was doing that didn't really work that well. And so I'm trying to refocus, and I want to be there where most of my followers are, and that's on my podcast, and it's right here on YouTube and on TikTok. And I think that if I focus on those places and I kind of bring all the content a bit together, that's why I also rebranded this channel to Story Secrets. Because that's basically what I do. I try to show the secrets of these stories, these deeper layers. That works really well on TikTok. And I figured, well, since that was already the majority of the videos that I posted here on YouTube, why not do the same here? And then of course it will always keep its focus on the stuff that I'm really passionate about, Star Wars and more recently anime. But I will also definitely do some excursions to Marvel stuff and well, Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and fantasy. I'd love to talk more about fantasy and to integrate that also on this channel. I'm just hoping that everybody feels at home here, and that my current followers are not going to say, "Oh, but it's no longer about Star Wars, so we're out of here." And that's why I want to be here daily, so I can give this broad scope of different commentaries, different topics, so that there will be enough for everyone to keep following the channel. But that's probably more my own insecurity about, mixing things up a little bit. I shouldn't be too worried. All right, let's get going. Star Wars Andor Episode 4, Aldhani. Hey, I'm Father Roderick, and I am going to talk about Episode 4 of this amazing Star Wars series that is so different from anything else we've seen before. This entire series, as I've said before, feels like a movie. It's got a very slow burn, but every once in a while it starts to accelerate. And as I've explained before, the story itself is constantly using 3 episodes that kind of form a story unit. So it's got a beginning, a middle part. That middle part is always, of course, the episode that feels a bit slow, like we don't get the payoff, but then the third episode, that gives you the payoff. So we're here with Episode 4 at the beginning of a new story arc, and this is going to focus on the heist. So Cassian Andor has been recruited to help. It's basically like Bilbo and the Lord, what is it? The Hobbit, where he is hired by the dwarves to help them steal the treasure back from the dragon. And kind of in an analog way here, Cassian Andor is at first hired and paid for his help, but he is helping the rebels. And what's so interesting about this particular story arc, and we'll see this over the course of these first 3 of these 3 episodes, it is in working with the rebels that he starts to slowly understand their plight and why they are rebelling. And he is slowly transforming from someone who's just in it for the money, a bit like Han Solo. He is starting to become a rebel himself. But of course, that is not happening right away, and that will also depend on how he gets involved and starts to sympathize with some of these rebels, and we also, and that's another thing that I like about Andor, the complexity of the rebel movement itself. It's not just one club where everybody has the same ideals and is in it for the same reasons. No, in fact, the rebellion is made up out of very, very different people, and we will see in the next few episodes that there are also very morally gray people in the rebellion, and people that are in it for the wrong reasons. And so, it's going to take a while also for Andor to figure out where he stands. And of course, he too does some morally very questionable things in this story. But over time, he will slowly start to embrace his role in the overall, you could say, destiny of the rebels. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's first look at the summary of this particular episode. And I found this synopsis on winteriscoming.net. The episode gives us several perspectives on Coruscant. We see Luthen, we see Mon Mothma, we see several officers in the Imperial Security Bureau, the ISB. I think this is the first time that we truly get to see how that security bureau works, and the way it's displayed with everything in white, very sterile, very clean, very proper. It's the total opposite of the world of Cassian Andor and the rebels, where it's all dirty and grimy and disorganized and improvised. But that's a classic Star Wars contrast. You know, the over-organized empire that seems so powerful, but is actually, even though it looks all pristine, it's corrupt on the inside. The corruption, the mess is in their hearts, in their souls. Whereas the rebels, they may seem disorganized, they may seem very poor in resources, but their heart is in the right place, and that's their secret strength. So, when he's not rounding up possible future recruits for the rebellion, Luthen, played by Stellan Skarsgård, is a wealthy antique dealer. So this, of course, is the double identity or the second identity, who coordinates secret meetings with Mon Mothma, disguised as appointments to sell her unique treasures. During this most recent meeting, they speak in hushed tones about secretly moving money around without the Empire's notice. So you can tell that Mon Mothma is also playing a double role. She is, on the one hand, posing as this very rich, high-level citizen of Coruscant, an important senator in the Imperial Senate, but she's actually, unbeknownst to even her closest family members, she's helping the rebellion. When they don't say it outright, it is clear that these two are key players in what will become the rebellion. The stakes are extremely high. Mon Mothma is an Imperial senator who's constantly being tailed by spies masquerading as her security guards and aides. And this is making her feel extremely uncomfortable. Who can you trust? And it's very, very difficult to do what she does undercover when she's so in the public's eye as a senator and so scrutinized. And this is maybe also why Luthen is one of her few contacts. That's someone that she can trust. But the rest, they really need to hide it. That's why they always meet in kind of the back part of the store, because you don't even know if the personal aides of Luthen can be trusted. Keeping up the facade is becoming more difficult, especially when Mon Mothma finds out that her husband Perrin, played by Alistair Mackenzie, is setting up a dinner party with a bunch of her political rivals and enemies. Now, that husband of hers is another great role, because it's totally not what you expect. We of course know very little about Mon Mothma. We've only seen her in a few scenes here and there, but it turns out that her husband is so not living the same values, and it can be so blind to what his wife stands for, and is so insensitive. And it's just a guy you immediately start to dislike. He's walking around in this bathrobe almost, and he seems to be so completely careless about higher ideals. And then, of course, later on we get to see her daughter, who is also kind of in between the two and has lots of difficulties determining where her loyalty lies, and if she should choose her father's side or mother's side. I think this will all later on start to get disjointed. But here we see the tension in her personal life, which will make it even harder to keep her composure. Elsewhere on Coruscant, we get a glimpse inside the Imperial Security Bureau, and we are introduced to Dedra Meero. Great role. I think she's going to be super important to the story. Played by Denise Gao. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. I think it's another very, very cool Imperial role. She wants to learn more about the Pre-Mor corporate security incident on Ferrix. While she insists that she's not doing it for her career, it's clear that she's very interested in being taken more seriously. So she is struggling against all her higher-ups who tell her to not meddle with these things. And she is a bit like Cyril, very, very, I would say, idealistic, if that's possible, on the side of the Empire. But she's very I would say, conscientious almost. So she wants to know more. Meanwhile, oh, wait a minute. I think I skipped something. Yeah, there you go. On the flip side of the Imperial officer coin is Cyril Karn, who has been stripped of his position and duty and sent packing back to his mother on Coruscant. And this is a part of Coruscant that we've never seen before. It's shown in a very moody way. So you see him literally go down to the lower levels of Coruscant, where the simple people live. And we discover that he's actually from a very modest background. And then his mother, I think, explains a lot about why he is who he is. I'll comment on that a little bit more later on. But no matter how many red flags this man waves, it's clear the showrunners want us to question our harsh feelings towards him and maybe even try to empathize with his points of view. I agree with this assessment. I think that the story tries to show us that even though Cyril Karn works for the Empire, or, well, not really, he's not an Imperial officer, not yet, but he's definitely on the wrong side of history, you could say. He still is, again, just like Dedra, or Dedra, very conscientious. And well, there's something laudable in that. Meanwhile, we get plenty of teases about Cassian's eventual fate in Rogue One. Luthen tries to convince Cassian to join the burgeoning rebellion by telling him that there are only a few outcomes for a guy like him, one of which is dying fighting the Empire. So that's, of course, a premonition. As collateral to get him to join a ragtag group of rebels on Aldhani, Luthen gives Cassian an expensive kyber crystal and tells him to bring it back to him. This was a bit of a weird moment. I still don't really understand why he did that. And of course, the kyber crystal later on will also cause some problems for Cassian when the rebels discover that he has it on him. But I was like, okay, well, but why? Why do they give us this central object? There has to be more to this, but maybe we'll discover later. And if you have any ideas about that, let me know in the comments. Luthen tells Cassian to give everything he's got all to the cause, instead of carving off pieces of himself until there's nothing left to give. It's the call to action. It's the vocation that Cassian still is very reluctant to embrace. Luthen then introduces Cassian to Vel, played by Faye Marsay, who I think is also, wasn't she in Game of Thrones? She's the reluctant leader of a small group of Aldhanis who have a plan to infiltrate an Imperial garrison and steal crates of payroll documents. So it's a real money heist. The group doesn't trust Cassian, but forms an uneasy alliance with the mercenary who is trying to prove his worth to a cause he's not yet sure he wants to be a part of. So, well, Cassian actually doesn't have a choice. He's just... the alternative was to get killed as a simple thief, and, well, he feels that there's more to this. Maybe it's also a bit, there's a lot of money that he's going to be paid. He's got that kyber crystal kind of shows that Luthen is serious, but maybe he also starts to feel a little bit that there's more in it for him as well. This may be part of his journey. Luthen, no, wait a minute. The episode ends right before they launch an attack on the Empire, setting up for an intense and action-packed episode 5 that surely will feature Cassian losing new allies but possibly finding his place in the rebellion. Okay, so this episode was, to me, very similar to certain other episodes in, for instance, the Clone Wars series or Rebels. I loved the gritty, realistic look of Coruscant. And it's so different from the first time that we ever saw Coruscant. Remember, that was in the special editions that George Lucas made. And he changed the ending of The Return of the Jedi to show us the celebrations after the fall of the Emperor. And they gave us this beautiful glimpse of Coruscant, which we had heard about, and it was already part of some of the novels that came out. but we had never seen it. And I remember just scrutinizing the blurry pictures of the DVD, the screen grabs that were posted online. This was the dawn of the internet. I was like, oh my gosh, that looks such an amazing place. And then, of course, in the prequels, we get to see much more of Coruscant. But here, it gets, Coruscant is brought to another level where it feels like a real place. And it literally introduces layers. What once was just this big city planet now turns out to be this very realistic place where people, you've got the higher ups like Mon Mothma, they live in very luxury apartments. She even has a tree in the middle of her apartment. That must cost a fortune on a basically a planet that is only steel and concrete. And then you see the very humble apartment where Karn's mother lives and where he grew up. I also loved the arrival of Luthen with this old shuttle and this forced banter with the other passenger and visitor, and it was like, oh my gosh, we've all been there, right? You're on a plane and you start to descend, and then this chatty other person keeps asking you questions, and you just don't want to have that conversation, and then that person gives you all sorts of advice on where to go and what to see, and you're like, yeah, sure, but I'm here by myself. I'm here for my friends. Anyway, I like that little scene again. That other guy really doesn't have any. It's not really important to the story, but it gives it texture, and that's what I liked about it. I really liked Dedra's clash with her superiors. That also feels similar to the arc of Cyril Karn, where she too is confronted not with the, let's say, the pragmatism and corruption of her superiors, but she's hurt by the what's the name for it? It's just this extremely formal approach, this hierarchy where, you're just a low-level beginning officer. You have nothing to say. Know your place. And you can tell that there's more to her. She is very talented. She feels that there's something more to this whole case of Cassian Andor, and she wants to know more. And so I wouldn't be surprised if in the end she'll somehow team up with Cyril Karn, because they both struggle with their superiors and they want to get to the bottom. The only thing that still distinguishes her from Cyril Karn is that she doesn't have a personal beef in the story yet, but I think that will come at one point. The dialogue, especially on Coruscant, I thought was great. Great writing, great execution. And then all the scenes on the planet Aldhani, of course, were filmed in Scotland. And I love Scotland. I've been there multiple times in my life. That's just one of those places on Earth where I always want to go back. I left a part of my heart there. And just seeing how much Aldhani is Scotland. Oh, amazing. Including the misty kind of the moisture in the air, the mud everywhere. I've walked in those same highlands for weeks, and oh my gosh, I never thought that we would get to see a Scotland planet, but now Scotland is part of Star Wars. And hey, I live in the Netherlands, so for me it's next door. I can go on pilgrimage to the planet Aldhani, and I will. I do think that even though I love to see Scotland, there was too much of a unbalance, you could say, between what we saw of Coruscant and how just amazing that looked, and then the very underwhelming introduction of Cassian to the other rebel group. It felt so small scale, and even though they went on location, which I applaud, it's better than the volume, the digital screens, but it did feel a little bit small and cheap in the sense that you kind of expect to see more people. And this is an ongoing problem that I have with episodes 4, 5, and 6. Um, it's it's filmed, of course, still during COVID lockdown, so there's a lot, of course, that mitigates um, the what they did, but I feel like that they were there with a skeleton crew almost, and just a very few extras, um, especially in episode 6. I think that felt like a low budget production, whereas Coruscant is like, oh my gosh, they must have spent so much money on making this look awesome, and it does. Uh, a little bit more enhancement maybe of the Scottish landscape would have worked. I don't know. Maybe what it is on purpose to show just the awesomeness of Coruscant, and then to see how simple the Rebel alliance is at that point. Maybe it's on purpose, but to me it felt unbalanced. But anyway, that's just me. Their apparent suicide mission, of course, foreshadows what will happen later on in Rogue One. Another thing that was a bit weird was the sudden ending of this episode. I did like the tease of the sky event that they talk about here for the first time, the Eye of Aldhani. That will be their cover during the heist. But it's just talk right now. So I'm curious, and I'm having this mental image of what that would look like. But all of a sudden, it just ends there, the episode. And then, oh, okay. That's apparently what this series does all the time. There's not a real payoff. We will only get that in episode 6. All right. So those are my initial impressions. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. Let me talk about the best scene. I loved the chilling scenes in the Imperial Security Bureau, and especially the leader, I forgot his name. It was this great guy, very classic, I don't know, just his face, his hair, his composure, his accent, the way he talks, very much like another Tarkin. And he has this talk about seeing the rebellion and the rebels and all these unruly planets on the outskirts of the Empire. And he compares it as a disease. And he sees them, the security officers, as surgeons. They are there to intervene and to literally cut out the cancerous elements in the Empire, which of course is a horrible way to look at these people and to look at these planets. And by positioning himself as a surgeon, as a doctor, it all gets a lot of kind of Nazi vibes, which is apparently on purpose. But it's this idea that the people that they rule over have no dignity, have no value to them. And if they oppose, if they have a different opinion, if they rebel, then they are not people anymore. They're a disease, and they have to be literally obliterated, destroyed, cut out, which is a very gruesome way to talk about people and about peoples. So I really thought that was well written and well executed. As always, there are a few Easter eggs, not that many, but there was one here. And that is Cassian, who mentions fighting on the planet of Mimban when he was 16 years old. Now, this conflict was first seen in Solo, a Star Wars story, although we never see, of course, Cassian as a cook there. And it took place in 10 years before the Battle of Yavin. So very cool to see that hint. It's just a small quote here, but that they link it to Solo. Then, best quote, I would say, is from Luthen, who says, "Wouldn't you rather give it all at once to something real than carve off useless pieces till there's nothing left?" For me, this is so relatable, because as a priest, of course, I feel like I've also heard that call in my life. What do you want to do with your life? Do you just want to have a regular job and just do the little things, or do you want to go for this bigger ideal, this bigger mission? You're like the mission from God. And of course, when I was 17 years old and I felt that vocation, I had like these super big ideals. That's why I can relate so much to the rebellion in a certain way. Like it's me against the world, and I'm joining the Savior to root out evil in the world. Yeah, over time, of course, you start to realize how hard that actually is, and how small your own contribution to that is, how little actually you can do all by yourself. But that's part of any journey, I think, in life. But that calling to something that is bigger than you, and then bigger than you could have come up with yourself, that's why it's a calling, right? I didn't come up myself with the idea of becoming a priest. It felt like something that just all of a sudden appeared in my mind, and it's like, okay, yeah, I think I'm in. So I like that particular quote. And it's of course a very common theme in Star Wars. Um, then of course a chilling quote, the most chilling quote you could say, is what Major, I wrote it down here, Major Partagas, that's his name. The longer we wait to identify a disorder, the harder it is to treat the disease. Ruthless. Oh, that's actually not part of the quote. That's my assessment. That's a ruthless thing to say. And then, what is the major theme of this particular episode? I would say it's the importance of the fellowship. So, in a similar way as Tolkien tells the story of Bilbo and Frodo, who are also called to this quest that is bigger than their little life as hobbits, the quest itself does not change you. The quest is only part of what's ahead. What's much more important is the fellowship. For Bilbo the dwarves, for Frodo, it's the whole fellowship of the ring. And it's the company that changes you and that forms you and that makes you grow into this hero. You can never do it alone in these stories. And I think for Cash and Andor, it's the same thing. He goes from a loner, someone who is in it for his own personal quest, which of course is finding his sister. But there's not much to live for in his life. And then slowly he's identifying with these rebels, getting to know them. He's building stronger relationships. And it's the rebels that change him. I really like that because it is also part of the bigger contrast that you see constantly in Star Wars between the Empire, where there's always contrast. There's always a hierarchy. But you're always alone in the Empire. Yes, you may feel that you're part of this big empire that is so powerful, but in the end, a lot of the people that work for the Empire and work in the Empire are super alone. And maybe this is also why we see both Dedra and Cyril so isolated. They have colleagues, they have superiors, but they don't have friends. Even Mon Mothma on Coruscant, she has a family, but it's actually, she couldn't be more apart. She's extremely lonely. And only Luthen, who's also a rebel, is a friend. And is more than just a colleague or a partner in crime. And I think that the rebels and the story of the rebels will show us that camaraderie, friendship, trust, and that has to be built. And it's not easy to trust one another, especially because all these rebels are from different backgrounds and are in it for different motivations. But in the end, the reward of that faith and that trust in one another, that is the strength of the rebellion. And this is the fatal flaw in the fabric of the Empire. It's that little exhaust port in the Death Star is in fact a metaphor, you could say, of the only thing that the Empire does not have and cannot have, and that is compassion. It's true friendship. It's trust. They distrust everyone, and they want to eradicate anyone who is a threat to their strength. And it's what Leia tells Tarkin. You know, the more you tighten your grip, you think you're strong, but the more you exert that strength and you crush others, the more will slip from your fingers, and ultimately you'll lose everything. That, I think, is the underlying motive in this episode, and maybe in the entire series. Those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think. I would love to hear your opinion as well. Star Wars Andor Episode 5, The Axe Forgets. This is the middle episode of this second trilogy, you could say, of episodes that will end with The Eye. And this episode is called The Axe Forgets, and it refers to a conversation that Cassian has with one of the other rebels. Let's go to the synopsis. I think this one is from Wikipedia. On Aldhani, Clem, which is, of course, the name of Cassian's foster father, and it's not his real name, Clem hides his past from his fellow rebels, causing most of them, particularly Arvel Skeen, to distrust him. Taramin Barcona trains Cassian and the other rebels for the planned heist. While traveling to the Aldhani Imperial garrison, Cassian reveals that he is a mercenary. The team leader, Vel, decides to continue with the mission and hold off dealing with Clem's past until they have achieved their objectives, which is kind of like putting a lot of trust in someone you barely know. But I think it's the trust follows this confession of Cassian that he's just a mercenary. So he comes clean, and then that gives them enough reason to, well, to trust him. Not that they really have an alternative anyway. Meanwhile, the Imperial officer and rebel double agent Lieutenant Gorn secretly aids Vel's team. On Coruscant, meanwhile, Cyril Karn explores new career prospects with Edie's help. Edie is his mother. And that was just, I don't know how you felt about those scenes, but I thought they were heartbreaking in a certain way and difficult to watch, because you can tell how incredibly strong his mother's grip has always been on him. And he's been relegated to the role of a child. You see him in his old room, and there is no respect of his mother for him. She only looks at him as this kind of failed child that now she has to rescue, and she will fix it. You don't talk. Let me call Uncle so-and-so and let me fix your life. How humiliating. And I think that for Cyril Karn, it crushed what he had started to build up. Remember, in the previous episode, he was still the leader of all the other officers trying to catch this Cassian Andor guy. And now he's in the lowest of the lowest position, and back under the tutelage of his mom. It's heartbreaking, and I think that we see that he still has this hologram of Cassian Andor, and what I think will happen is that he's projecting all his anger and frustration and childhood traumas on Cassian Andor, because Cassian is the reason that he's back at the beginning, and that all his dreams of finally getting rid of his, that oppressive environment from which he came, that whole dream was shattered by Cassian Andor, and he resents Cassian for it, and that, of course, is what we often do when we deal with trauma in the wrong way. We blame it on others, but we forget that the only person who can heal the past is us. Well, poor Cyril Karn, of course, should seek therapy, but I don't think that you can find that on Coruscant. Definitely not in the Empire. So the only way that he knows how to react to this is by kind of like building up this hatred to Cassian Andor. Mon Mothma also establishes a new charitable foundation while managing increasingly tense relations with her husband and daughter. I love that we got to see her daughter. Her daughter was already part of the expanded universe, the part of the novels that were labeled at one point when Disney took over as legends, but they used the same name, and the idea that she had a daughter. I don't think that we ever hear about her husband in the existing expanded universe. In this series, of course, the daughter is very different from what they did in the past with this character. I haven't read the books, though, so correct me if I'm wrong. But I like that we see that even Mon Mothma is, she may become this great rebel leader, but that at the same time, she's not doing a very good job as a mom. And maybe that's impossible in this given situation, but she fails as a mom here, and her daughter is definitely choosing her husband's side, which must be extremely painful because Mon Mothma already feels so isolated. So I love those scenes. They're also a bit hard to watch because, well, we all have traumas like that, or, well, I say we all have, but I definitely have traumas like that. So it feels like, oh, this is getting a little bit close to home. It's hitting close to home. These family issues. Elsewhere, the ISB supervisor Blevin, ISB are it's a security division, acquires a hotel as the new ISB headquarters on Ferrix. And this is a very short glimpse of Ferrix, and I didn't really understand why they showed it to us, other than, hey, remember, there's still stuff going on Ferrix. But it felt a bit gratuitous, and it didn't add anything to the plot. But maybe it's something they're setting up for later. That's kind of what I felt. But here on just in the overall story arc of this episode, it felt a bit out of place. Meanwhile, his rival Miro and her assistant here to discover evidence that the rebels are conducting a series of coordinated heists of Imperial weapons and technology. Rael anxiously waits. Rael/Luthen. I still have to kind of try to remember that this is the same guy. Rael anxiously waits for a transmission from Cassian's rebel team. What are my impressions of this episode? It was the total opposite of what I expected. I thought that now that we've seen Cassian's introduction to the rebels, we would get, all the preparations, the attack on the Imperial Dam. I thought it was going to be a much bigger episode than it actually is. Even the rehearsals for the heist seem a bit amateurish, too simple. Again, not many extras there. It was a little bit on the slow side. The entire episode felt a bit drawn out. Not much happened. Maybe in retrospect, we will see that they were setting up things, but I still think that this is the weakest episode of the series so far. But it's just because I understand that you need to set up stuff, but this episode lacked like a core, like a heart, like something important that propels the story forward. It felt like we were on hold with all these storylines. Nothing really happened. And, well, from a storytelling perspective, I think that's a flaw. But that's, again, it's my assessment, it's my opinion. Let me know if you think otherwise. I liked, as I said before, the characterization of Cyril Karn and what happens with his mom and all that. There was this funny moment, of course, the Cheerios with the blue milk. I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool, because the blue milk, of course, Star Wars. But it was more than just a little wink to the fans. Him getting cereal or Cheerios for breakfast, I mean, that too is humiliating. Basically, his mom is like, yeah, I just treat you as a child. You eat children's food. It's a children's breakfast. Um, he wants to be in control himself, and yet his mother does everything for him, including preparing his breakfast. He seems to be completely all the his confidence is gone. He seems to be stuck there, back at the beginning of his life, and I think that will start to brood inside of him. That will generate an anger and you can feel the volcano underneath all of that. Favorite Easter egg? In the background of Luthen's storeroom, you see a small detail on the right upper side. It's very hard to miss, but thanks, of course, to all the sleuths on the internet, they've told us what we see there on one of the shelves, next to a Jedi and Sith holocron, which already is kind of spectacular that he has holocrons in his store, knowing how important they are and how valuable they are. Right to the right of that are two of the Sankara stones of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Remember in the final scenes where you have this big skull-like structure and they have to place all these glowing stones inside of it? Well, there are two of those sitting there on the shelves. So does that mean that Indiana Jones is actually part of Star Wars? How can that be? Or maybe these stones... Of course, Star Wars happens in the past. If you look at the overall historic timeline, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, how did these stones ever end up on the planet Earth to be discovered then by Indiana Jones? I guess that's a story that will never be told. Let's see. And by the way, I think this is not something that the writers came up with, because they've told us time and again that they don't want to do fan service. I think this is actually just a little joke from the props department. They had to come up with all sorts of objects, so they went wild. And I think there are way more objects in Luthen's store that have deeper meanings, that are little Easter eggs. So I think that's just a props department. And thanks. We like our Easter eggs. Best quote? Well, Arvel Skeen, of course. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. The thing is, in episode 6, of course, Arvel Skeen will have a different side. I won't spoil it if you haven't seen the episode yet. But that also kind of undermines what he says here. The axe forgets and the tree remembers, because turns out, was there really an axe in his life? Maybe not. The major theme of this episode... It's clearly the dynamic of the mercenary versus the idealists. And we get to see that everyone in the rebellion fights his or own fight. Cyril Karn, Mon Mothma, Dedra, they all have their own motivations. And it's much less black and white than we are used to think. Star Wars is always about like these very clearly defined heroes, clearly defined villains. And here everybody's a bit gray. And even the rebellion and even the Empire. The Empire too has good guys to a certain extent. People that have ideals, that are not corrupt. And maybe even are able to empathize, show compassion, who knows. And the rebels? Well, not everybody is as idealistic as they seem or as they say they are. And, the next episode will show us some examples of that. But I like what they did in this episode is to show us that even our future heroes, like Mon Mothma, they too struggle with day-to-day stuff, like how do I keep my family together? What do I do with my daughter who is so rebellious and so hard to handle and so difficult to convince, especially because I can't really tell them what's truly going on. I love those conundrums in this episode. I think that's it. I'm going to wrap it up here. So again, let me know what you thought in the comments, and let's move on to the next episode. Star Wars Andor Episode 6, The Eye. This is the culmination of what was set up in episodes 4 and 5. We now finally get to witness the heist. And not just the heist, we also get to witness this incredible celestial phenomenon that has been teased for 2 episodes now, and that apparently is a thing you just don't want to miss. Even the Imperial officers that are working around the dam, they really want to see it, and they're frustrated that they may miss it because they are on duty. So they're promising a lot in this episode, and of course the question is, do they really pay it off? And is what we get to see at the end of this episode really live up to our expectations? I will let you know what I thought, but let's first take a look at the synopsis of what happens in this episode. There's a lot that happens, there's a lot of action, so I'll just use the synopsis that I found on Wikipedia because it's pretty concise. Aided by Gorn, the rebels successfully infiltrate the garrison by posing as an escort squad for Commandant J-Hold Behaz, Gorn's superior. They take Behaz's family as hostages and force him to give them access to the garrison's payroll vault. While loading the credits onto an Imperial freighter, they are caught by Imperial forces, and in the ensuing firefight, Taramin and Gorn are killed. Cinta is unable to make it onto the ship, and so only Cassian, Skeen, Vel, and Nemik, poor Nemik, escape from Aldhani. They land on another planet to treat Nemik's injuries, but he quickly succumbs. With Vel occupied looking after Nemik, Skeen proposes to Cassian that they leave Vel behind together and split the payroll between them. It's a shocking moment. Cassian kills Skeen, fearing for his life and disgusted by Skeen's selfishness. He tells Vel about the conversation and informs her that he plans to take a small portion of the payroll, the amount Rael had promised to him as a payment, and leave everything else to her. Back on Coruscant, Rael hears news of the theft and quietly celebrates. What are my impressions? I loved this episode. I thought it started slow, so I was a bit worried during the first half of the episode, especially about that celestial event, because the only thing we see every 10 minutes is just this one meteor, and I was like, oh, that's it? And it's very kind of gloomy and misty. I mean, it's Scotland, right? So I was like, oh, how are they going to make this worth our while? But my fears were very quickly subsided when I saw the second half of the story, where we get to see that heist, and it's nail-bitingly tense, and oh my gosh, amazingly well executed. And it's a classic heist story, There's this vault with all these Imperial credits, and I was a bit puzzled that in order to pay all these Imperial soldiers and mechanics and officers, they still use coin. You would think that they can just wire something via computer, but then we also see that actually computers are pretty rare. We only see computers, let alone like something like the internet, on Coruscant, in higher ranking officers' offices, and well, the most advanced computer that we saw so far in Andor is actually a Tandy Radio Shack TRS-80. That's very primitive computer technology. So I don't know exactly how they operate their spaceships and the Death Star, but apparently it's just very just with flipping switches and stuff. And digital technology seems to be almost non-existent, at least in this era of Star Wars history. So maybe that is why we do have physical coin that you could just have to store, and then that's obviously something that you can steal. I also really loved how they paced this episode. So it's like preparation. You got all the tension of the infiltration. You see a little bit of what they rehearsed for, although I still believe that these, they dress up as as Imperials, but it doesn't look very convincing. But maybe it's a kind of a backward planet. Maybe, all the Imperials that work there are kind of low-level Imperials, so they're not very professional anyway. Maybe that's why they get away with it. But this feels very different from what we saw of the Empire in other stories. I was also surprised that there are no stormtroopers here. That would have been such like a classic thing to do, and a kind of an obvious thing to do. You've got this dam; it's important. You've got this money that is stored in this vault. So you would think, why don't you have stormtroopers? And I think it's on purpose. Again, it's to step away from all the tropes of Star Wars, and it makes this feel more realistic in a certain way. We do get to see Imperial TIE fighters. That was cool. And it was a bit unexpected, and also a bit, well, jarring is maybe too harsh. But so at one point, there's this one officer, all the communications were jammed, but he hears a bit of the chatter that goes on between the rebels, and that's where he activates his crew to go, to step into their TIE fighters. And you see that there's this hangar, and you've got the TIE fighters, and it all looks like, all of a sudden, it's like, wow, this looks out of a movie. Whereas the dam, that's all practical. And they actually filmed it in Scotland in a real dam. They used both the exterior and the interior. But it looks very much like something on Earth, because it is filmed on Earth, whereas the part with the TIE fighters and the whole the hangar and everything, that was a bit like, oh yeah, that's special effects. That's not really there. But anyway, I don't think they could do it any other way. But I like that we got to see the classic TIE fighter helmets. That will make a lot of my friends from the 501st very happy to see that their costumes are also featured in Andor. What else? I really loved the shootout. Also, that this was, of course, bound to go wrong, because we're just halfway through the season. So obviously, this was not going to be a success. You kind of, at least I saw it coming, that Nemik would get killed. He's too idealistic. And he's set up like there. You see this personal connection that he has with Cassian, and him writing kind of the theory almost of the rebellion, the ideology. Then Cassian receiving that booklet. I think it's brilliant, but it was pretty clear that Nemik would die, sacrificing himself for the greater cause, which of course is a very heroic way to die. And then what did surprise me, that was after they fly away, they escape, there's this time jump. So all of a sudden, Nemik is dying, and then they're in another place where there's this doctor operating on him, and then you get this very kind of like subdued ending of the episode. So it doesn't end on a high, it ends on a pretty dramatic note. You've got this betrayal by this other guy, by Skeen. You get Cassian, who shoots first, and I expected them to end with a successful escape. That would be classic Star Wars. But this is not classic Star Wars. They're doing something different here. So I applaud them for doing it, but as a Star Wars fan, I was like, okay, this is not what Star Wars normally does. I really liked the fact that we see the guy who's in charge of I will call it the Scotland planet, or the operations there. He too has a child. He has a wife. He has a family, and you can see how much the Imperial way of thinking has influenced the way he treats his son. And it's in a way similar to poor Cyril Karn, who is also treated a bit by his mom in a similar way. You don't count. You have to follow orders. You just follow my lead. And here, this Imperial officer also doesn't respect his son's wishes. His son doesn't want to dress up, but, well, he just has to obey because that's how the empire works. It's all hierarchical. Dad is the boss. His wife is not important. And the child, of course, obviously, the only thing that he needs to learn is how to obey and follow orders. And even in the midst of all that, he doesn't seem to realize that his family is important. He ultimately is shown as a coward who just goes along, and he himself is following orders from the rebels. There's no heroism in that. So I like these kind of subtle themes here. Favorite Easter egg? Well, I already mentioned Cassian shoots first. They seem to do this more often nowadays in these television series, a bit like a nudge to Han Solo and whether or not he shot first. But there is a very cool Easter egg, and I didn't come up with this myself, but once I saw it on Twitter, I was like, wow, that is amazing. Nemik, when he's already dying, he's still helping his fellow rebels to escape. So he's so altruistic. And so he's sitting there and helping them navigate all these very dangerous asteroids, like what looks like a beautiful meteor shower, like almost like a religious event on the planet, is actually super dangerous because these are just like flaming rocks that can destroy your ship. But he steers them through, all these dangers. And you know what the last thing he says before he dies? Or the last thing at least we hear him say before he dies is climb. And Cassian has to trust, and he does, and that's how they survive. But you know where this last word, what that refers to. In Rogue One, K2SO, who is also, of course, Cassian's friend, and I hope that we will see his introduction here in this series, maybe in season 2. But K2SO, right before he dies, his last word to Cassian is the same. It's climb. And he insists. And this is right before Cassian will actually start climbing into that tower, at the end of Rogue One. So it's like, wow. When he hears that, he must have thought of Nemik. And when K2SO says climb, it's also the fulfillment in Rogue One of everything that Nemik gave his life for, because that climbing up, that's what ultimately saves the plans to the Death Star and allows ultimately the rebels to destroy the Death Star. So I thought it was amazing how this sacrifice of Nemik for the greater good, for the rebellion, for the galaxy is now directly linked through this one word with what will happen at the end of Rogue One. I thought it was a brilliant Easter egg, brilliant writing. Best quote? Karis Nemik, when he speaks to Cassian before they start the heist, is struggling with his faith. And I thought it was, again, amazing writing. Believing in something does not mean that you never doubt or that you have no fear. He says to Cassian, I'm struggling to understand why my faith doesn't calm me. I believe in something. Why am I so unsettled? I mean, you have nothing and you sleep like a stone. Shouldn't that be the opposite? Shouldn't people that have no belief, shouldn't they be worried about their life, about their future? And someone who has ideals, who has faith, who knows where he's going and why he is here on Earth, why he is here in the galaxy, that should make you sleep, right? But he can't sleep. He's nervous. And I like that because it humanizes the idealists. It humanizes the faithful. Having faith does not mean that you have no fear. and that you have no struggle. Faith in itself always brings along struggle, and you have to overcome that. And then it's Cassian, in a certain way, the atheist here, who has to comfort the faithful, this faithful boy. You'll sleep when this is all over. Kind of, again, foreshadowing. Yes, he will sleep, but it's not the sleep of the living, it's the sleep of death. Thought it was really cool. What is the major theme here? Or at least for me, an important theme in this particular episode, and in the story arc of these 3 episodes, is the contrast between the Empire and its selfish utilitarian approach to everything, versus the rebellion with their ideals, and in this case also the inhabitants of this planet, the Aldani, and their faith and their religion. And this, I think, goes back to what George Lucas has said many times about why he wrote Star Wars. He said, Star Wars is a story that reflects our times. And at the time, he was very much, of course, it was still the Vietnam War, and then America's colonialism, and this attitude of we just grab what we need and get out of there, and we use military force. Star Wars has always been very political, and I think that George Lucas, with his stories, wanted to warn against approaching other peoples and other cultures as being inferior or something that you need to control, let alone using resources that belong to other people and steal them from them. That is what the Empire does. And there are these conversations in these episodes where, even on Aldani itself, where these Imperials are like, yeah, these pilgrims, you know what, they're just a nuisance. We want to build this out. The last thing we want here is this religious thing that happens. These faithful are a nuisance to us. So let's just use alcohol and other temptations to reduce their numbers, which is like, this is exactly what colonial countries have done in our history. My country included, the Netherlands. We have our current wealth is because we stole it from other countries. We supported slavery, and so the Western world, so wealthy, so powerful in history, has done at many times in history. And well, let's not forget the church. Let's include that in the mix. I'm a priest, so the church also has these dark pages in its history where it used its earthly power to suppress other people's faith, to impose the Catholic faith, and to force people to go along with it, not because of, idealistic motives, but because power, money, influence. The Imperials, the Empire, is blind to what beliefs and faith and ideals can do with people. They may have a certain sense of it, that it's dangerous, so they try to suppress it, but they underestimate the importance of faith. You remember this conversation between some of the Imperial officers on the Death Star and Darth Vader, and how even Vader is irritated by their lack of faith, their lack of respect for those that believe in the Force, your sorcerous ways. And then Vader is like, what do you mean? As if this is something that doesn't exist. And he uses the Force to choke that officer, and Tarkin is like, stop it. But you see in Vader this rage. Even no matter how dark he is on the inside, but he hates that atheist approach of the Empire, that doesn't show any respect for something deeper than possession, than power. And that is the ultimate weakness, I keep saying this, of the Empire. This is why they keep losing throughout history. And this is why the rebels win. These few pilgrims that are there, they are, in a certain way, amplifying, you could say, what this tiny little group of rebels is doing. And it's their faith, and they look up at the sky and they see, they are still able to wonder, to be mesmerized by what, from a scientific point of view, is just asteroids, But they can see that there is more to this. There is something of beauty that the Empire cannot understand. That's why the Imperial headquarters, the security headquarters, it's neat, it's organized, but there is no beauty there. There's nothing. Whereas if you look at the clothes of these pilgrims, they're colorful, it's handmade, there is care, there is love in the way they dress, in their rituals. There is awe, there is respect for nature, for what, as a believer myself, I can totally relate to that. And I too sometimes feel that same frustration when people step on my soul saying, you have no right to do what you do. You have no right to interpret Star Wars. I had that the other day on TikTok, where someone is like, you should not be talking about anime. You're a priest. You're just doing religious propaganda. You don't belong here. And I'm like, dude, open your mind, open your heart. We all have something to contribute. You're free to listen or to not to listen, but don't tell someone else what he or she cannot believe in, or tell someone else that you have no place here on the internet with your faith, because I despise your faith. That's so I sometimes I feel like what Vader feels, that rage, like, but you should respect me. And I feel for these poor pilgrims here, these Aldanis that are so oppressed by the Empire, and yet they do get there. They do get their moment. They see the beauty, and even the rebels don't see the beauty. They are too busy with the money and their cause. So maybe there too, there's room for growth on both sides, the rebels and the Empire. And it's only the faithful that are there, the pilgrims, that see the beauty of the galaxy, beyond the wars that we fight over things that ultimately don't matter. All right, I think that wraps it up for this live stream. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this. We will do this again, maybe not per episode, because I'd like to do some of these live hours just chatting about the news and make it less like this was very much. I want to do the episode reviews. I also like to just chat for an hour, which I will do. I will get to your comments in a minute. Yeah, that's all I have to say. If this is going to be available also as an audio podcast, but you've already listened, so that's not for you. But in case you want to hear my other comments and you're not always able to join me live here on the channel, know that for my patrons, I have that weekly show, Story Secrets. All right, what's going on in the chat? Galen, Skeen being killed by Andor was well done. Very well said about Vader and many things deeper. Thank you. Cheerios are awesome. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just way too sugary. I've never had Cheerios as a child, and I can't eat them. But it's kind of, I know that sure. Sometimes cereal is nice for breakfast, but here I think it's a symbol for him being put down. You're just a child here. You eat children's food. I don't understand how Luthen's fake hair works. Well, it's a wig. They show it to us. He puts on a wig. So, Yularen. What is Yularen? I forgot about that. Yeah, Keith is really an old timer. Galen, I question if Luthen Rael is actually Force Master Jyn Altis, mentioned in Kenobi. He had left the Jedi Order similar to Ahsoka and Qui-Gon Jinn, yet formed his own Order of the Force. I don't think so. I don't think so. Because they really wanted to tell a different story here without the Force, without Jedi, they've been so vocal about that. It almost would feel like a cop-out if this guy is secretly a Jedi or a fallen Jedi or something like Ahsoka. No, I hope they don't. I hope this is just someone like an intellectual on Coruscant who sees what's going on and wants to do something about it and uses his position and his wealth to help the rebels. That for me would be more than enough. I don't need, any like secret identities or big reveals. I don't think that that's what they want to do with this story, but again, maybe you're right. That was all. Yeah, I apologize. Like this live stream is not much of a conversation because it's a bit like when I'm streaming my podcast. It's just like this one way. I'm talking to the camera all the time, but next time let's just chat about Star Wars. Just ask questions, or maybe I'll ask you questions because I don't know everything. But let's just talk about the news and have a conversation like that. So anyway, I'm gonna be here every day at 5 p.m. Maybe sometimes on Sundays I won't be there, but I'll let you know on social media. And I'll also continue to feed this channel. Let me know, by the way, your thoughts in the comments about whether or not I should merge the anime and the Star Wars. Just have one channel for all the story secrets. That would make my life a lot easier. But I can see that there are a lot of anime people now gathering on the other channel. So I don't know. Maybe I'll think about it a little bit more. I think Wolf Yularen was the leader of ISB. Oh, really? Okay, cool. Luthen has those Mortis-style artifacts, which I can't see by accident, regardless of who he is. Yeah, maybe. Although, again, I think it's just the props department that did those things. I don't think that they are hiding things deliberately as small Easter eggs that will have a big reveal later on. At least that's not the story so far. But we'll see. All right, I'm going to cook some dinner, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. And hope to talk soon here on the channel. Make sure to give this video a like, this stream, and to subscribe to the channel. Talk to you later, and may the Force be with you.